Hey, how's it going again? It's Tyler Parker, here with the MISO project. So, I uh, I mentioned that I have a qualitative assessment scale that I created, called the MISO-I QA-40, and I just want to go over some of the major points, theoretical points, why I asked the questions that I'm asking, and sort of give like a brief overview. It's 40 questions. I'm not going to go over the specifics of every little detail why I decided to do what I decided to do, but I definitely wanted to give you like a brief summation of the key elements of the assessment so that you can understand like why, because a lot of the questions are kind of weird. So on a okay, so I ask about symptom severity on a scale of 0 to 100. I want to know about any other psychological diagnosis you might have or medical diagnosis, because I want to be able to rule out other medical issues. Now, I ask questions like, are you hungry right now? Do you have problems with your appetite? Do you have problems with rapid weight gain, weight loss, problems with fatigue and concentrating? Because it appears that sometimes people have worse symptoms when they are fatigued or when they're upset or distressed. And so I kind of want to just see the patterns that emerge when people report how they're doing on a day-to-day with those specific symptoms, to see if maybe there are some things that are in common. Going to bed, staying asleep, things like that. Do you currently take any medication? That's a pretty standard question. Does anyone in your family have misophonia? And I also want to know if anyone else that you know has misophonia, because I want to track not only heritability but transmittability, I guess you would say, because I have heard a few small incidents about that. So yeah, ask about misophonia transmission to see if there's anything there. I want to know about the genesis. When did it start? See if there's some common factors. Okay, this is a pretty big one that I'd like. Who or what triggered the first noticeable misophonia event? Please be as descriptive as you can. Include information such as your general mood at the time, if you remember, the relationship with the person or persons or things that triggered your first event, what your life was like at the time. This is one of the more important questions on the assessment, because it's going to be able to tell me exactly how this happens, whether it's a stress reaction, whether it's some sort of like traumatic event, whatever the case may be. I'd like to know as much information as possible, especially emotional information, to try and see how this disorder comes about. So I ask about what were the first sounds that were intolerable, what do you consider intolerable now, to check if things have changed over time. And some people report that things that they see, like repetitive movements, like legs shaking or things like that, are troublesome. So that's a different brain region, but it would help to understand what kinds of mechanisms of mind, maybe they're neural mechanisms, maybe they're integrated mechanisms of just brain functioning that are on a higher order than just this neural tract going from the auditory system into the auditory cortex, or if it's visual, then it's going straight back to the occipital cortex. Whatever the case may be, this is also a very important question. So if you experience anything that you see that you find intolerable just as much as what you hear, I'd really like to know that. I asked about particulars of the sounds, sound origin. That's also pretty important. So okay, so definitely I want to know, like, if something else or someone else made the sound that you find intolerable, or if you made the sound yourself, how would you react to it? Because I'd like to see if it is particular to the sound itself, or if it's more the person who's making it. And that's why I have assessment scales in MISO-I, dealing with antisocial tendencies or family constellation and things like that, to help me to see how important it is for a person making a sound that you don't like, vice the sound itself, because that's going to kind of help us tell like where this is even coming from. Yeah, a lot of particulars about the sound events themselves. What kinds of situations make things worse for you, and also what kinds of situations make things better for you. What can you do to sort of alleviate the tension, the anxiety, or the rage that you have, or whatever other emotion that you have. I'd like to know that because that's going to sort of guide us into what we can do to treat it. You know, if everyone does a certain thing, like if everyone, you know, counts to 10 or whatever the case may be, then like, okay, well, maybe we need to figure this into the treatment paradigm because it seems to be helping. So any sort of tricks of the trade that you have, I'd like to know about that. And your moods at the time, especially too. Yeah, and then the very, very last question is just for you to elaborate on anything that you feel that you did not include. You know, so that I can get a better picture that you paint and not a picture that I'm asking you to paint for me. And then I'll just compile that data and try to see if there's any patterns in that, or see if there's any unique circumstances, or anything like that. So that in total is the MISO-I. It's going to take a little bit of time to fill out, and I appreciate you taking that time out to do that. But this is one of the more important assessments, I think, not only just because I made it, but because of the type of questions that I'm asking, because they're very important for further understanding, okay? So, all right, well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate your participation.